Awesome. How's it going, everyone? Super excited to be here. This is a topic that I'm really, really passionate about and excited to share some of the things that our team has done recently to actually leverage product and data to build better customer experiences. So my name is Sam, and I'm a product manager for Intuit. I'm on the payments team, and our primary focus for me is on invoicing as well as driving data and analytics for the team. So our invoicing product is primarily focused in QuickBooks, but we also drive money movement for all the products in the Intuit ecosystem, from TurboTax, our consumer tax platform, to Mint, our consumer finance management product. So what I'm going to talk about today, well, I want to cover 3 different areas. And to start, I'm going to provide a little bit of background on what I work on, why I think invoicing is cool and why I think it matters. Then I'm going to touch a little bit on how Intuit approaches building products. I want to ground us in that mentality in order to get to how we use product analytics to actually scale this approach and stay customer obsessed as a big company. And we do this by empowering our teams to be active and not passive consumers of data. So I'm not sure how many people here are familiar with Intuit, but we build products for consumers and small businesses and gig economy workers that help them with the most intimidating aspects of their financial lives, whether that's payroll or payments or accounting or financing. And our mission is powering prosperity around the world because our ultimate goal is to make sure that our customers have to think about these things as little as possible. As a part of the invoicing team, our mission is powering prosperity through invoicing. So if we think about the job of invoicing, you're creating a statement of work, bill for some goods and services you've provided one of your clients, and then tracking and getting paid on that work. So it seems pretty simple, right? But it's actually one of the most painful aspects of transacting as a business in today's economy. So I want to do a little quiz. Does anyone know the total dollar value of unpaid invoices just for small businesses in the US at this moment? $50 billion? 3 trillion? Oh, it's not that much. It is big, though. It's $825 billion. And I mean, you could see it's bigger than some pretty important aspects of US GDP spending. So this is a big problem. And it doesn't just impact the small business owners that we work with. It actually has trickling effects into the US economy. So if all those invoices were automatically paid tomorrow, small business owners could hire an additional 2.1 million employees, reducing US unemployment by 27%, and actually increasing their own pay by an incremental $30,000. So this is the pain that we're looking to solve on my team. We build products that help small business owners throughout every step in this process, from creating and customizing a beautiful invoice, to tracking, sending, and getting paid on the invoice, and then finally depositing their hard-earned money and automatically updating their accounting. So that's the main problem and product that I work on, but I also have another directive on my team, which is driving data and analytics for payments. And recently, when I joined this team, one of my main focuses has been increasing the use of data in decisions. And in order to explain how we think about that, I want to first walk us through how Intuit has historically approached building products and reinventing itself. So for us, it all boils down to customer obsession. And I'm sure most folks in this room have heard about customer-backed thinking, building stuff that your customers want, but we think about it in a little bit of a different way, and it goes all the way back to our founding. So quick little history lesson. Intuit was founded 35 years ago by our founder, Scott Cook, and it all started with this kind of myth of how Intuit came to be, which was he was sitting in his kitchen, and he watched his wife struggling to balance the family checkbook at the kitchen table. He actually got so obsessed with this problem that he just couldn't let it go. And he didn't necessarily get obsessed with the accounting struggles she was experiencing. He got obsessed with the underlying emotions of anxiety and stress that accompanied dealing with someone's financials. And so we decided to build Quicken, Intuit's first product and our first personal finance management software. Customer behavior is the truth. So one of the things I really like about that story is that Scott doesn't just stop at what his wife is telling him is the issue with trying to manage the family's checkbooks. He could make a product that solely focused on making accounting easier, but he went deeper because he realized that the underlying emotions were really the issue, and he wanted to get to the why behind why she was struggling. This type of customer-backed active obsession and engagement and real-world observation has been the catalyst for some of the biggest product transformations we've made over the last 35 years. So if we go back to that first product, Quicken, soon after launch, Scott and the team surveyed a whole bunch of employees, or a whole bunch of users, and they were asking them questions that focused on how they use the product, what could be better, but there was this one question in there on where they were using Quicken that Scott found particularly interesting. What she saw is that half of customers were using the product in the office, which didn't necessarily make sense because Quicken was a personal finance management tool. So while the rest of the team started responding to usability requests, he really dug into this answer because it didn't fit with the overall trend of how other users were using Quicken or how he thought they would be using Quicken. And as a result, he discovered that they were using it to run their small business. And so he invented QuickBooks, which became the #1 small business software in just 2 months at double the price of the leading competitor at the time. This same pattern emerged fairly recently with Mint. So a group of product managers were looking at Mint usage data, and they saw a subset of customers who were using Mint to track and manage expenses and income related to Uber and Lyft. This pattern didn't fit with what they thought the product should be used for. But rather than ignoring it and focusing on other insights on ways they could improve Mint for the consumer, they actually realized that there was a huge opportunity there. And they built QuickBooks Self-Employed, specifically designed for the gig economy worker, which has been the fastest growing and stickiest product in our 35-year history. So why am I walking you guys through those stories? Well, the point I really want to get at here is that in each case, there's always an insight that doesn't necessarily fit with our preconceptions of where our product's heading, what we want our customers to do, and even who our product is for, that's key in order to make this big transformational step. And this is what I think true active customer obsession is. Our founder, Scott, has a saying called savoring the surprise that I think really encompasses this well. It's digging into the insight or the result that makes no sense, focusing on the outlier, the information that doesn't fit, to know the customer better than they know themselves. And this mentality is absolutely crucial in how we approach data. So we have empowered a data culture at our company where all consumers of data don't just stop at what they're expecting, the metric they're expecting to look at, they actually dig into the why behind the numbers they're seeing. And this is really how we've used product analytics to extend this customer obsession to all of our employees as we've grown bigger and bigger. So there's really 3 key points for me in how we've been able to leverage product analytics to drive this type of active customer obsession. It starts with an infrastructure that enables speed. Speed with both time to insight, time to test, and by removing barriers to access. Second, it's about focusing on metrics that are thoughtfully crafted and 100% actionable. And third, it's about fostering a data-driven culture that engages actively with data rather than passively consuming it. And I'll talk a little bit about what I think the differences are there in a bit. So starting with the infrastructure that enables these metrics to be tracked and this culture to thrive. When we think about an infrastructure that enables speed, 3 important points come up for our team. First, it's about removing the bottleneck. And the way we do this is by investing in a single source of truth and spinning multiple versions of truth off of it. I think data democratization is a pretty well-circulated idea, and I'm sure most folks in this audience have heard of it before, but I really cannot stress how critical this is to have true data democratization within your company. As you grow, it's really, really important to have every single member of your team actively engaging with the data on their own time and not relying on a bogged-down analytics team for every answer that they need. True data democratization does 2 equally important things. It empowers the product teams to move at the speed of curiosity and go dig in to find those game-changing insights, but it also gives your data team time back to focus on the work that matters. Additionally, if everyone can work with the data on their own time, they're much more likely to engage with these metrics and start to embrace a culture where data is key to decision-making. So how exactly do we remove this bottleneck? Well, for us, a super simplified version of what we're kind of the architecture we're working with is we collect data points from a whole bunch of different touch points that our customers interact with. And we aggregate that into a single source of truth. And this is really important because in order to move fast, you can't just have easy ways of working with the data. You need confidence that the data is accurate so that you're not second guessing and constantly checking data sources against other data sources. And by having that single source of truth as the starting point off of which a bunch of different ways of working are enabled, all of the consumers of these different versions of truth know that the data is accurate, and they can also talk about it in the same way with each other. So if I'm using Amplitude for product data and I want to go compare that with some data on Wavefront for anomaly detection, I'm using the same terms, and it's easier for me to have a conversation with the analyst who's focused there. The second big important piece of our data strategy is focusing on metrics that matter. For us, there's 4 keys to having great, consistent, and consumable metrics. How you track. It's a bit of a cheesy phrase, but I think it gets at a really important point, which is you need to make sure you're tracking the same things in the same ways. And really making sure that you're doing this is worth the time and energy up front. So if you have, say, 3 different teams dispersed across 3 different areas, and one team is tracking a subscription as the click on the subscription button, and yet another team is tracking that subscription as the viewing of the confirmation screen, and yet another team is tracking that as the server callback, this really breaks down as you start to grow, and it's much harder to actually compare these metrics, and it starts to lead into this questioning of, is the data actually accurate? This gets into the taxonomy. So we invested a lot upfront in actually having a dedicated team try to understand our products holistically to create a taxonomy that both was consumable but scaled across all of our different offerings. But after that point, we've actually started moving away from relying on humans to enforce this standard and investing in programmatic ways of ensuring consistency across the board. So we've started building out APIs and internal endpoints that actually construct our taxonomy for us. So we're starting to remove the capacity for human error in actually making this all line up. In addition, this actually frees up the data science team as they're no longer the bottleneck for creating this taxonomy and distributing it to the engineers. And it also means your engineering team is a lot more confident in how they're tracking the data. Metric definition. This is really, really important. Having the right metrics is, I think, one of the most worthwhile things you can invest your time in. So for us, we have 4 key principles in how we build our metrics. They have to be comparative, they have to be customer-centric, they have to drive our business outcomes, and they have to be actionable. And that actionable piece is, in my opinion, by far and away the most important point. And it means 2 things. It means, A, that the team who owns that metric has 100% ownership over all of the ways that that metric can move. And additionally, it means that if the metric changes, the team's actually going to change how they behave. So really, really crucial to invest some time here. And finally, data accuracy. This point is also big, and I want to touch on 2 different versions of it. So I think the most important thing when it comes to data accuracy is making sure that all the consumers of your data are on the same page. If you're going to use product data to be purely directional, just to try to get at decisional insights to actually prioritize the work you've got in your backlog, that's totally fine. But you need every single person on your team to know it so that they're talking about it in the same ways and you don't run into those areas of friction where one person is taking this as gospel and the other says, no, it's just, it's inaccurate, it's just directional data. But for us, we weren't actually really happy with that answer of using our product data just as directional. So we started to invest in ways of making it more and more accurate. The easy one to start was to invest in the way we were actually collecting and tracking data to make sure that it had a lot of integrity at the start. But we went beyond that to actually invest in ways of building out ways that consumers of the data can actually check how performant our clickstream data is. So one of the ways that we've done this that's actually been really, really helpful is we have dedicated dashboards to the parity of metrics that should line up 1-to-1. So the example here is there's probably around 3 to 4 events that should all fire at the same time when a user performs an action. We build dashboards that aggregate this into a single comparative metric that can show all the different consumers how performant our data is that day. All of this should lead to metrics that are 100% actionable that the team aligns and engages with. We recently went through a transformation in how we were actually defining the KPIs for our teams and got really, really serious about the specific inputs that were going into a team's KPIs. And apart from actually doing a better job of telling us how we're doing and serving our customers, this led to another outcome that is, I think, equally as important. Now that we've gotten really invested in how these metrics are being tracked, teams are much more likely to engage with them because they feel like they own the whole process. So a good example for us is the team that owns invoicing engagement used to be judged off of some actions that actually didn't fully encapsulate the work that they were working on. So we would say, okay, you're an engaged user if you've logged in X amount of times or if you've done this one action. But then this team would come back and say, well, hey, I'm working on a whole bunch of stuff, and it's not actually reflected in there. And additionally, I think some of those actions are a little bit more valuable than others. Why isn't that laddering up to my metric? By bringing in a bunch of different factors of engagement, we've been able to build out a much richer metric that actually reflects the work they're driving. And all this leads to what I think is the most important part of data on our team, which is having a data-driven culture that actually actively engages with these insights. So the data democratization and having the right metrics are great because they help you move fast. But the really game-changing insights, like the ones that led to QuickBooks or QuickBooks Self-Employed from Mint, those come from digging in with the data on a daily basis. In order to build this data-driven culture, the type of culture that is going to focus in on those outliers that may not fit with the trend that you're expecting, we've really focused in on three things. First, education. This is a really easy way to get a lot of folks on your team excited about working with data. So we host lunch and learns, analytics days, and data boot camps for anyone on our product team who wants to learn how to be more proficient with our tools and the data that we're actually working with. Additionally, baking data into your day. So the more ways you can weave data into your team's habits, the better. I don't think repetition ruins the prayer when it comes to working with data. And the more that you can enforce and talk about the metrics you're tracking really goes a long way to actually kind of fostering that culture. Finally, and most importantly, encouraging active consumption rather than passive consumption. So when I say active consumption, I mean questioning the metrics that you're looking at, trying to dig in and understand why you're seeing that final conversion point or that many users dropping off there, not just taking it at face value. Apart from educating our data consumers on why this is important and different ways of doing this, there's one really tactical and simple thing we've adopted that's actually helped us a lot in this third category, which is moving away from static reports to active queries and interactive charts. So this is my least favorite feature in Amplitude and also a lot of other analytics tools, but it's actually saving charts. So while I think having static reports is great for reporting out on those core key business KPIs, we encourage all of our teams to run the queries they're interested in real time. And this does a couple things. A, it gets them thinking in the analytical mindset about who they're looking at and where else they could be going. So it's no longer how many people reach step 4, but they actually have to go through the motions of saying, okay, I want to look at this group of users and I want to see them go through these different steps. And if you invest in the right tools, this type of interactive query takes about just as long as it does to access a shared report. So what does this culture actually look like in action? I'm going to end with a little bit story of how we have embraced active data consumption recently to build one of our latest product offerings. So as an invoicing product, we could think back to that $825 billion number I talked about earlier. The biggest benefit that we can deliver is helping our customers get paid on these invoices. And one of the ways that we've had a lot of success in doing this is by actually pay-enabling invoices by email so that their clients can pay on their own times through our secure portal. This works really well for our customers who embrace it, and we've seen a dramatic increase in how much they're getting paid. However, recently we noticed this common group of users who are having difficulty getting to that email step of our funnel. So they were doing everything right up until that point. They were creating invoices, they were saving them, they were customizing them. In some cases, they were even putting pay enablement on the invoice itself, but then they were downloading it and not actually getting through to that email process to get it to their client. As a result, this group experienced much lower pay rates, much higher overdue payments, and an overall just less money in their bank account than the rest of our users who completed this workflow. So I think the immediate reaction my team had to this was, okay, the email workflow is broken for some users. Let's go in and figure out how to get them over that step, right? But that actually isn't the whole story. Though we could see where the users were dropping off, it didn't tell us who these users were, where else they were going after they dropped off, and what was common about all of them. So we really dug into the data before deciding to go invest further in our existing email workflow, and we found a couple of interesting insights there. By looking at the data, we were able to see that these users shared a couple interesting traits. Over half of these users actually use Gmail for the business email address that they signed up for QuickBooks with. And additionally, you can create a shared invoice link after you download it and then share it afterwards. And all of these shared invoice links kept cropping up, being accessed from Gmail or on a Chrome browser. So we've identified a common behavior here and also an opportunity to move our products into a habit that is already comfortable for our users. So rather than trying to create a different workflow within inside of QuickBooks, we actually took invoicing and dropped it right inside of Gmail so that they never have to leave the conversations that they're already having with their clients. And had we just asked our customers, hey, do you have a problem with copying these invoices over to Gmail? They would have said no. In fact, they did say no. They said, no, it's fine. It takes a couple seconds. I download it and drop it over in a conversation. But by looking at the data, we were actually able to see this huge disparity in how much those users were getting paid versus the ones who were able to email contextually and all in the same place. And since launching this feature in Gmail, we're seeing a huge increase in the paid rates for these users. So to recap, a couple quick takeaways. Invest in an infrastructure that enables speed through access and accuracy. Focus on metrics that are consistent and 100% actionable. And encourage a data culture that embraces active over passive consumption. By doing these three things, we've been able to continuously reinvent our products before this change is actually needed. Great. Well, thank you guys so much. And I think we have time for some questions now.